Chris, thank you for joining the podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. Now, when it comes to basketball, I've made this vocal before you came on. I'm like, I know nothing about basketball, right? It's a sport that I've never really followed. So I am a bit ignorant when it comes to basketball, so I do apologize in advance if I ask stupid questions.
That's okay, I'm ignorant when it comes to finance sometimes. We're okay.
Hey, look, for me, I think one thing that I really want to understand, I think a lot of people out there as well that want to understand is, how do you come to the terms that I'm going to be a basketball player? Do you just be like, damn, I'm tall, I want to become a basketball player? Or is there like a method and process that goes into joining basketball?
No, look,
other than the height.
Well, the height was, I've always had that, but it never drove me to basketball. It was, I played tennis until I was 17 years old.
Right.
You know what I find myself speaking about this a lot is that so many people and so many parents want to put their kids on a pathway.
Yeah.
There's no such thing in my mind. It's more about the behaviours and habits that you form on whichever path you walk along, and they'll hold you in pretty good stead whatever you choose to do. And I was always a pretty dedicated tennis player, and I trained a lot, and I had pretty good habits in school and sport. And yeah, my height eventually put me onto a basketball court to fill in for my younger brother. He was also just a little bit shorter than me, and the story is he came into my bedroom. I was doing my year 12 exams and studying. I told him no 3 or 4 times, and eventually Mum made me fill in. This is a men's C grade team at Keilor basketball state. It was a horrible game. And I went under sufferance. And you know, I'll say to a lot of people, the days where I call them kicking rocks days, where you can't really, you don't want to be there, you don't want to do it. And that was me. And I had the simplest thought on the way up, and that was, you know, if I'm going to be here, I might as well try. And it sounds like such a simple thing to say, but that was something that I've always carried with me, that, hey, even on the days I can't really be bothered, I'm going to try to be my best. And this day I didn't want to do that. I reckon there were 10 people in the crowd that day. And trying for me just meant sprinting. And I was 7 foot tall, I could move. And I stood out to one person in the crowd who happened to be a junior basketball coach at the Melbourne Tigers. And he found a way to get
That was your first game?
That was my first ever game, men's C-grade basketball. And it took him a little while, no mobile phones back then. It took him a while to track me down. And he invited me to come down and train with the under-18s team at the Melbourne Tigers. And as they say, the rest is history.
So your first game, you already got scouted?
Yeah, without even knowing. And again,
that's insane.
And you know what? It's when you're 7 foot tall, you stand out.
Yeah.
And so you've got a choice. You can stand out in a positive manner, or you can stand out in a negative manner. Because whatever I do, I'm going to stand out. People are going to see me. So I guess looking back, I was fortunate. I had no intention of ever playing a second game of basketball. I was just helping my brother out. And you know, people have since asked me what I loved about the game and those sorts. I didn't love the game. I loved the people that it introduced me to, and through the love of the people, I grew to love the game. And yeah, I probably love the game more now than when I played it, but it's the people attached to it more than the sport itself.
So your first game, you get scouted and all that thing's happening, and you said you don't love the game. So when you were approached, you don't love the game, so what made you go for it?
Fascination. To do something different. There wasn't a tennis tournament for the next 6 weeks.
Right.
No, look, it was just exactly that. I thought I'll go down, I'll have a look, and I met a team of good people, and I suppose at some level they convinced me to keep coming down even though I was a long way behind. And they seemed interested in my development. And, you know, it's one thing to be successful as a group, but it's another thing to try to help bring people along with you. And they were an established team.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you learn after the event, but so many teams I could have walked into that would have had no interest in helping me but helping themselves. And I walked into one of the strongest basketball clubs in the country, and they're more worried about helping me catch up to where they were than they were protecting their own spot on the team. And that's the longer you go through it, you really realise how rare that is.
100%. And the funny thing is, like, it's an opportunity that you took, right? You know, your mum made you go there to replace your brother, and then you just took that opportunity, and look where life took you. So I think it's a great story, because I preach a lot to my friends and whatnot. Whenever an opportunity comes, just take it. You just don't know where it'll lead you. And that's a perfect example of embracing the opportunity, and you became a superstar in the whole basketball world in the country.
Yeah. So you go down that path. That's early days, right? At what point do you realize that, look, you know what, I'm really good at this? At what point is it sort of, obviously you got drafted from the Australian League into the States.
Yep.
But at what point, in your mind, does it actually register? Look, you know what, I can do this for a career.
You know what? Sometimes I'd sit back and I'd watch guys like Mark Bradkey, who was one of the best centres in Australian history, and I'd watch what he did, and I didn't think it was out of the realms of possibility that if I invested the time, I could physically do it. But the thing was, I was 25 kilos lighter than him. I wasn't strong enough. I needed to invest in my body, and as quickly as I got into the game, and I mean, from the day I picked up a basketball for the first time, just over 4 years later, I was in the NBA. So it seems really, really quick, and it is. But I'm always at pains to remind people that it took me 2 years to get in the NBL, which isn't long. But my first year in the NBL, I played 3 minutes a game. My second year in the NBL, I played 8 minutes a game. Mm-hmm. It was only that third year in the NBL where I kind of started figuring it out, and my body caught up to my work rate, and I wasn't tired the whole time. And you know what? It's a couple of good games breeds confidence, and it certainly did go quickly. But at the time, it felt like the amount of work I put in was. I was always proud of the fact that no one worked harder than me. Yeah, and we always got preached to that win or lose, it doesn't matter, but shake your opponent's hand at the end of the game, look them in the eye. Make sure that you know that if they beat you, they beat the best version of you. Never shake their hand at the end of the game knowing you could have done better. Mm-hmm. So we were sort of brought up with that type of mentality. And what people ask about, geez, I can't remember what your question was now, but people ask all the time about confidence and improvement, and they ask how you prepare for a game. Well, you prepare for a game 3 months, 6 months before you play it. I don't care what you do on game day. The work's been done. If you're dependent on your game day, you probably haven't put the work in. But it's a really powerful thing to go into a game, into a meeting, into a business event, whatever it is, knowing that you've done the work and knowing no matter what they throw at you, you're prepared. So I got there probably after 4 or 5 years, I reckon.
Mm-hmm. Because it was an incredible sort of rapid rise from, like you said, those early days where you hadn't taken to a court, and then you just chipped away. You got through those initial years in the NBL and then elevated to the NBA. How much work did you need to do to go to that next level, and what kind of support were you given when you got to the NBA?
Not as much when I got there. So much support here. A coach named Brian Gorgon, still the best I've ever had. He instilled that work ethic into me, and helped me understand that improvement's not linear. You don't just get a little bit better every day. At some level, at some stage, when you're investing in the physical performance, you'll bottom out because you're exhausted. But as you start coming out the other side, your rate of improvement will be so much quicker than if you were just this little gradual thing. But the work was insane. It was, and people always want a short fix or a secret to how to get better. It's you put the time in, and especially as I've already mentioned, on those days where you can't be bothered, they're the ones that really, really matter. Because, like I said, I mean, there's opportunity out there everywhere, and kids of today, especially, I notice. I've been in a position now where I scout young kids with the potential to give them an opportunity, and you see what they're like when they don't know they're being evaluated, because I've sat down the back or I've sent someone in and they don't work. It's pretty simple. I mean, figure out, get your technique right, get your body right, put in the work, and just keep going. Opportunity will come. It doesn't happen straight away, but it comes. But look, the volume of work was incredible. The support was incredible when I got there. It sort of all started again, but without that level of support. Over there it's a lot more cutthroat, where everyone is in it for themselves. The difference between the 6th guy and the 8th guy in the team's about $10 million a year. Mm-hmm. So everybody wants to be the 6th guy, the 4th guy, because there's such a huge financial reward for being that was an environment that I certainly wasn't accustomed to when I walked into it.
Yeah. You speak about the volume of work, right? So for those who maybe don't follow the NBA as closely as some others do, the duration of a season is very, very long. 82 games in the season, aside from playoffs. And if you average that out over the course of the season, that's 3.5 games a week.
Yep.
That's an enormous amount of work. Like, you compare that to AFL, NRL, any other kind of sport. This is enormous. How on earth does a person prepare themselves physically and mentally to be able to put up and deliver those performances week, not even week in week, almost every second day?
Yeah, look, mentally it's probably harder. Because add in all of the travel in between, the hotel rooms, the being away from home. But look, physically, either you're training or you're playing a game. If you're in Europe or if you're in Australia, you're training every day, but you're home. And, Australia's probably the most overtrained, underplayed league in the world. The NBA is the other way around. When you get into the season, there's very little training time. And that presents difficulties in itself, because I went through stages where I wasn't playing many minutes. And so you might have 3 or 4 games in a week and 1 practice session. And every game I don't play, I'm falling behind the guys who do, because they're getting their reps in and I'm not. So I had to find ways to get my individual training in before and after a game. So there are often times you see people walking in, sitting down by the courtside, they've got their popcorn, they've got their drinks, they're just ready to have a good night. I'm sprinting up and down the sideline trying to get my conditioning work, and they're laughing and joking, and I knew I wasn't going to play, and you've just got to make sure you keep up and keep your head above water. But look, physically, comparing it to AFL, we're by all intents and purposes, we don't have those impact injuries and that the recovery from those bigger impacts is what they do, nor do we cover as much ground. They cover 16, 18 kilometres in a game. We cover more like 5 or 6. It's just a very different type of physical activity. So, with what we know about recovery and preparation now, it's the physical side's okay. It's the mental side, just turning up, going through the motions, going home, jumping on a plane, hotel, rinse and repeat. And the times you do get with your family and friends at home is rare.
Yeah.
So then you get there, and especially this time of year, you've got Christmas, everyone you know is on holiday, and you're on an aeroplane to New York to play a game on Christmas Day and come back. You miss out on a lot.
How did you cope? What was your sort of your own personal self-coaching mechanism?
I tried to switch off as often as I could. I used to read a lot, but I'd play a game and my brain would be all over the place. I'd jump into a Matthew Riley novel or something just to take my brain off it straight away. Or I wrote a lot, and it's something I've picked up again recently. Because you find if it becomes all-consuming, you just can't escape it. And, I got much better as my career went on to leaving basketball on and around the court and making sure I could remove myself from it. A lot of players can't, and a lot of players don't need to. But for me, I needed that mental freshen up so that when it came training time again, I was looking forward to it. But by all, I'm not saying that's the right way to do it, but it was my way. Yeah. And it worked for me.
Because during your career, you were also over there when there was an NBA lockout.
Yep, that was tricky.
The season, essentially, the players and
the NBA lockout.
So the players and the teams couldn't agree on money.
Okay.
And so essentially, at the end of the Michael Jordan season, the '98 season, there was a lockout.
They went on strike.
Right.
Yeah.
The players couldn't agree, and the team owners couldn't agree on the money, and you were in the middle.
I was in the middle of that. No, look, it was we couldn't go to the practice facility. We had to find our own courts. I spent most of that summer with 2 pretty big names. Now it's Steve Nash and Dirk Nowitzki, and we worked out every day, and they were incredible in that space. So they had alternative upbringings to that, to a lot of what the NBA was. Dirk's from Germany, Steve's from Canada. They both had a pretty broad perspective, but they both worked incredibly hard, and that suited me very well. So we found our own routine, we found our own gym, we found our own basketball court, and we pushed each other. We still enjoyed ourselves along the way, and we lived in the same building, but all I knew was that when I got to the NBA, they were paying me a lot of money to do something I hadn't been doing for very long, and I never agreed with the lockout. For me, the people who represented me were saying I didn't want to play basketball for $5 million. I said, I'm more than happy to play basketball. I mean, that's more than I'll make in my lifetime. But you know what? It's that was the tricky part, and even to this day, that's the more I understand about business is that the owners have a financial risk attached to owning a club. The players don't. Mm-hmm. If there's a strike, the players don't lose money. They just don't get paid. The owners actively lose money. and they can actively lose money over the course of a season. The players cannot actively lose money. So I still think the owners need to be protected. That the players, I think, wanted a little bit too much, a little bit too high a percentage of total revenue. I just wanted to play basketball. I'm pretty simple. I'm pretty naive. Just let me play basketball and do my job.
Does the money get in the way though? Because a lot of sports people out there, and they get paid ridiculous amounts, and then in the same team you'll have people not earn as much.
Yep.
Right.
On the same team.
Yeah, on the same team. Does the politics come to play there, where people are like, damn, he's earning a lot, so I can't be stuffed, or I'm just gonna try to sabotage or create some sort of issue within the club?
On bad teams, it does. When you're not winning and everybody's looking to to grow their own standing on the team or improve their standing within the group, because that equals more money. But the other thing it does with the right mindset is if you're one of the players who, and when you say not earning as much,
they're still earning a lot though.
You wouldn't find anyone in the NBA in a full-time salary earning less than $1 million US a year. But the other thing it does is it demonstrates an opportunity in your locker room to say, hang on, if I can get better, look, that's not that far out of my reach to be where one of my teammates is. So work. Not in a selfish way, but I mentioned Steve Nash. He was always really big on making sure that you worked on your own game in your own time and the team game in your team time. But there are so many athletes out there who only want to work on the team's time. They want to develop their own skill set during team training, which is, in Steve's mind, and I agree, selfish. Not enough players and not enough people in the business world invest in themselves in their own time. They expect their bosses to do it for them on company time. So you see a lot of that in the NBA, where they'll just turn up and do the minimum required because they are getting paid a lot of money and it's guaranteed. For me, there have been a few situations I'd love to see there be consequence for players choosing not to turn up to training or almost faking injuries, or the Ben Simmons stuff, the Kyrie Irving stuff, where they choose to sit out. It hurts other players around the league. It hurts their ability to negotiate when it comes to collective bargaining. And
these people that fake injuries?
Absolutely. I mean, they're guaranteed $100 million. They don't care anymore. And that's the thing when you get to the top level, is that, hey, they're paying me no matter what I do now.
Can't the doctors pick out on that?
So, sorry?
Can't the doctors pick out on that?
Well, they can, but you know what? It's interesting. The club tends to take the side of the highest paid player because they're normally because they've got the highest profile, they're most marketable, they've got the shoe deal. The crowd comes to see them and they try to do everything they can to keep that player happy. So it really is a tail wagging the dog when you are talking that level of money. And saw it firsthand with Steve. I mean, Kyrie Irving didn't want to play. Durant wanted Steve sacked. Ben Simmons wouldn't train. Steve was the one who got fired because they couldn't afford to fire the other three who were the issue. So
there's a lot of politics.
It's like anything. There's always politics involved.
So, Chris, just then you talked about players wanting to, sometimes just do it in team time.
Yep.
Ben Simmons, Kobe Bryant famously came out to Melbourne and he did an interview and he said, one of the things about Ben Simmons is he will regret it if he never develops a jump shot.
Yep.
Is that one of those things that you see that he's just not doing enough of the grind? He's not just going and putting the shots up. There's obviously the mental side of things where he doesn't have the confidence to get out there on the court. Because he's an incredible player. He's able to, he's an amazing defender. He's an amazing passer. But at the same time, he just doesn't want to put those shots up.
Look, it's twofold. So first of all, I'll say that you're right. Ben Simmons does a lot of things incredibly well, and we jump to what he doesn't do well, but it's exactly that. I mean, you say he doesn't have the confidence to shoot it because he hasn't put the time in. I mean, again, those reps will develop a confidence if he can get his technique right, but from everyone that you speak to, there's an unwillingness to do more than what's required. His body's not great, but at the same time, you need to invest in your body to make sure your body is great. Same as your mind. We always talk about these three buckets. There's a bucket of skill development, a bucket of physical development, and a bucket of mental development. A lot of people seem really happy to invest in the skill bucket, and that almost overflows. But you look across here and your physical and your mental bucket are empty, and it doesn't matter how skilled you are if the other two things aren't available to you. So, now look, I agree. I'd love to see Ben almost find a love of the game again, where he wants to find somewhere else to go and wants to invest in his own game. And you're right, that's all it would take for him to be, again, in that top echelon of players in the NBA. But I just don't think he's going to do it.
Yeah, because he's getting paid as one. Like, he's on a
absolutely
$250 million.
And then again,
how long is the contract?
Again, why does he need to? In his mind, that if you're getting paid all that money,
and you're locked in,
whether I've got a jump shot or not, it doesn't matter. They've got to pay me anyway. So that's the danger of long-term contracts. That's part of the collective bargaining agreement. That the lockout happened over a few collective bargaining agreements ago, but. Even when Ben chose to sit out and, there was a confidential agreement made at the end, but, that if Ben had a better result, I think you would have found the owners would have dug in a lot harder to protect themselves even more. So Ben didn't have a lot of support when he set out, because I think the rest of the players knew that it was going to hurt them at the next collective bargaining agreement if he won and got paid out for those games and trainings he chose to miss.
How hard is it in the States to stay disciplined and focused on actually playing the game? Like, you talk about Ben Simmons, and it's a
lot of glamour and media.
Yeah. Right? Absolutely. Like, he goes out there, dates a Kardashian, everything that comes with that, and it has to distract a young player to sort of, I'm here to play basketball. I'm representing myself, my family, my country in a way as well. I'm being paid a lot of money to do that, but there's so much out there, glitz and glamour, that distracts me from that. What measures do NBA clubs have in place to keep players focused on playing the sport?
They have their own, like anyone else. They've got their coaches, they've got the teammates, they've got all of their staff. But it still comes down to your upbringing. It comes down to your own individual personality. So Josh Giddey would approach the exact same situation as Ben Simmons very differently. Dyson Daniels would approach it differently as well. But I think one of the biggest things still has to remain who you surround yourself with. And you can afford to put good people around you. I mean, essentially, when you walk into an NBA locker room, you've got 15 small businesses represented in a locker room. It's not 15 teammates. Josh, Ben, they've got teams around them that as soon as they walk out of that locker room, they envelop them and they go off and they do their own thing. But I think that's a really, really important part, to make sure that you're getting the right advice. You've got people who genuinely care about you. And we've spoken about Ben Simmons a little bit here, but I think Josh Giddey, you'll find over time, will be the polar opposite. He'll remain accessible. He'll remain approachable. He'll remain humble. And I've seen the amount of work he does. I've just seen him a few times over the last 6 weeks. The volume of work he's putting in outside of games and trainings, you see it. He's got an improved jump. Josh's jump shot was as bad as Ben's 2 years ago. It's improved out of sight. And to the extent where it's not really a weakness anymore. And that's been done in 18 months of countless hours in the gym. So how do you approach it? There are distractions out there for everyone, but it's hard to hand someone $100 million when you're 20 years old and say, now be humble. It's a tricky thing, but I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, but there are quite a few young players at the moment where the basic rule of thumb for those who I think do it right is you send every cent of your contract home and you live on endorsements. So no matter what happens at the end of your career, you've saved every single cent that you've made under contract. And however well you do with your endorsements, and you can still send some of that back, but they just need that type of advice to just don't blow it all. It's really easy to spend money. It's really easy to be extravagant. But at the same time, as I know you would know in your industry, it's pretty exciting to see where you can choose to invest money. And the type of projects you can be involved in building and the type of legacy you can be involved in leaving for your family, for those close to you. And I think the type of investments some of people are making now, we mentioned it off air, they go a lot further than just needing to make more money. They want to make a difference. So that's the flip side of that, I suppose, where you get a platform to be able to do that.
I feel like a lot of, like in the sports all around the world, young people are getting paid arm and a leg, right? Sometimes I feel like it's not even for their skill, it's more like because they're marketable, right? They got the shirt sales, right? I remember when Ronaldo went to Juventus, right? This guy, I think done like $100 million in shirt sales in like a day or something, right? I can't remember the exact figures, but it's almost like people are getting names to make money off them. That's why they pay him an arm and a leg. Do you think it's like in the NBA, or is it generally for the raw skill?
It has to be with the skill to begin with, and then the brand happens after the skill's been demonstrated. So, with situations like that, I think you'll find that as they get towards the end of their career, so they're paying them for their brand more than the skill towards the end. But at the start, you need to demonstrate a significant, really high level of skill to get that shoe deal and to get the endorsement deals. But no, you're right. I mean, we might see, LeBron James has spoken about wanting to play with his son. There may very well be a team that overpays him when he's 40 years old to play 1 year. Bring your son along. Yeah. That'll be historical. They'll sell a bunch of LeBron jerseys. They'll probably make their money back. But you're not going to win. Very rarely do you get a team do a deal like that and win. So because it comes down almost to to where the club's at, where they want to be, and if you got no chance of making playoffs, but you can make a bunch of money, why not? I suppose. Yeah.
I've often wondered, like in LeBron James's circumstances right now, he's worth say $1 billion or close to. He's got enough money in the world. Why doesn't he sign somewhere for $1? He just signs a $1 contract. He's still getting paid all his endorsements. Got plenty of money. And then he's already developed super teams in the past. Why doesn't he do the same thing?
It's interesting. I take away something. There's a minimum salary, of course. So let's call it minimum for whatever he has to make. But, we're bringing Dirk Nowitzki out here in 3 weeks. He did that at the Dallas Mavericks. He'd made enough money and he wanted to make sure that the teams he was retiring on were competitive. So instead of taking the $20 million that he probably could have taken, he took $5 million. And you hear people say, well, Crimey Riv, you're still making $5 million. But that $15 million is really important to their third or fourth player to make sure that they put the right crew around him to give him the best possible chance of succeeding. So absolutely. I'm a massive advocate of looking for non-financial value propositions for people who don't need the money, whether it be in business, whether it be in sport, wherever that is. I think there's more to it than the money, because you can buy anything you like, but you can't experience anything if you don't know where to go or what to look for. Or the money doesn't buy you success. It'll buy you the trimmings around the outside, but why doesn't he? He might. He might. Especially if it's with his son.
Yeah, fair enough. Taking us back to now your playing days, so you shared the court with some of the biggest names that have ever played the game. You've got Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, these sorts of guys. Even in the Australian, Guernsey as well, played alongside some absolute legends there as well. Who do you consider, not from those names, but in terms of people that you played against, who was the dirtiest player they ever played
against? I didn't know where.
There are quite a few.
The dirtiest ones are guys you've never heard of, and I won't name them and that was more here and in Russia because...
I was going to say it's probably
Russia. No, because their job isn't to win the game on the offensive end, it's to beat the hell out of me to make sure that so you get them, they're the dirtiest. But you mentioned some of those names. I got to play against Michael Jordan and the Bulls. I got to play against Allen Iverson. Shaquille O'Neal was the hardest individual opponent I ever had. I mean, just that level of physicality and skill was incredible. But it is amazing how accustomed you become to not competing against the idea of them, but actually what they are in front of you. We had a game when we were playing with the Australian national team where you could just tell a lot of the younger kids were a little bit daunted by Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, these guys. We subbed ourselves in and we literally flung them around, grabbed them by the jersey. Hey, I've got number 6 and it was Kobe Bryant. I've got number 9. The whole point was don't worry about the billboards. Just deal with what's in front of your face. They're just 5 guys in blue uniforms that we're going to try to beat. Oftentimes I've found when you come across names like that, and Luke Longley talks about this. He said, have you ever seen a team look defeated? He says, yeah, as soon as we walked in the gym. You're like, geez, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen. You definitely see that in sport, and it's, I mentioned it before, a lot of it's between the ears. They've just quit before they start, but some huge names, but they just added to the enjoyment for me.
Yeah. Now, in the game of basketball, obviously, it's generally seen as a tall man's game, tall person's game, and you're very, very tall yourself. But we're starting to see, and I think in the past as well, we have seen the role that the smaller players play. So you've got someone like a Paddy Mills, for example, right, who does an outstanding job for his team. From a technical perspective or strategic perspective, what role do you feel the smaller player has on the court? And in your ideal team, what role would they play?
No, they're vital. I mean, and I think they always have been. I mean, you look, Allen Iverson was 6'1", Muggsy Bogues is 5'6". You got champions all the way along. And it's
5'6".
I mean, it's skill, it's speed, it's the ability to shoot the ball, it's the ability to. I mean, their center of gravity is close to the ground. They handle the ball better than what we. It literally doesn't travel as far between their hand and the floor, so they've got much better control over it. So, I mean, the point guard's always been the most important position on the floor, and you see the evolution of that position with guys like Josh Giddey, who are 6'8" and 6'9", who are able to do it. Magic Johnson was one, but Steve Nash, we've spoken about. They're just crucial. I mean, they're absolutely vital to be able to shoot the ball well, but bigs do that as well now. But generally, the smaller guys are quicker. Generally, they handle it better. Generally, they'll tell you that they're smarter than us big guys, and they can control the team and run the sets and get everyone organised. But look, basketball's becoming non-positional. Yep. It's 5 guys who can play 5 positions, or 5 girls who can play 5 positions, and it really is interchangeable. So the smaller guys have an advantage. If I'm guarding someone small and I'm out in the perimeter, I'm so concerned with I can't keep them in front of me that I've got to back off, and it allows them. Similarly, when I get the ball in the block against someone little, they're worried about how they defend my size. So it's always about understanding where your strength is or where your advantage is, and putting your direct opponent at a disadvantage. So I think that, I don't think clearly there's always going to be a place. But you know what? Then you see some really unique ones. So Victor Wembanyama, who's coming in, he's going to be the number 1 draft pick this year.
How tall is he?
7'4", and he does things with the ball that I haven't seen point guards do. He's going to be generational. And my only hope with someone like that, bigs tend to carry more injuries. Mm-hmm. I just hope he stays fit and healthy. I'd love to see what he can do in the NBA.
You're saying Josh Giddey's name a lot. Big fan of him.
Yeah, he is. I mean, I played with his dad. I coached him for a minute. He's a local Yarraville kid.
Mm-hmm. Is he Australian?
Yeah, he's Aussie. Yeah, he's
the long curly hair guy, right?
Yeah, longish hair, and
right.
He grew Melbourne Tigers junior, so grew up playing basketball across an MSAC.
Okay.
He went straight to the NBA from the NBL. Improved dramatically in his final. He was missing out on state teams at under 16. Our representative program was telling him he wasn't good enough to represent our state 3 years before he got drafted to the NBA. So, again, it's a credit to the work he did and the mindset he had when in his mind, he failed, making these teams. But he's just improved out of sight the last 4 or 5 years now.
Because Melbourne is just an incredible, just melting pot of NBA players. Like going back even as far as Andrew Gaze, yourself, Mark Bradkey, Dellavedova, Ben Simmons. We can claim Kyrie Irving as well.
Let's not. Yeah.
But Dyson Daniels, the list goes on. There's just an incredible list comparative to the rest of the national output of NBA players. Obviously, we had the Melbourne Tigers, we had Southeast Melbourne Magic, we had the Titans, and now we've got the Southeast Melbourne and Melbourne United teams. It just seems that there's just such a great academy of players that come out of Melbourne.
And the thing is, they're being recognised earlier and identified earlier. So with the success of people like Josh and Dyson, and Dyson's country Victoria, so he was Bendigo.
Bendigo, yeah.
So they're being identified really, really early, and with social media and the way we communicate now, the world shrunk. So when Mark Bradkey made it, he had to demonstrate his skill on the national team and be seen in that space, which was a credit to him even getting there, because growing up in South Australia, moving across to Melbourne, it was hard to be seen back then. But the success of some of the guys who are in the NBA now, we've got NBA guys watching every NBL game. We've got them attending national junior championships. So it's going to be very, very rare for a talented young player to slip through the cracks anymore. And there's a kid up in Queensland, Rocco Zakarski, that the NBA's been aware of him since he's 13.
Yeah, right.
I guess he's probably 17 now, but that's the level of thoroughness that they have now when they come across, and they're asking everybody across, who do we need to see, who do we need to keep an eye on, and they just keep tabs. So, it's exciting for any young junior basketball knowing that, again, if they put in the work and they've got the talent, they'll have an opportunity at some stage.
Because the Boomers we won a bronze medal.
Yep.
We've taken that next step. We've got so many players playing in NBA or have played NBA and are now back in the NBL. Where do you see the next 4 years for the
Yeah, really exciting. You mentioned Matthew Dellavedova, but I think Josh Giddey comes in for him. Dyson Daniels will find his way into the team. It'll be fascinating to see what they do with Ben Simmons.
Yeah.
On talent, he probably gets in. On team chemistry, there's a question mark as to his motivation and his application if he's on that team. So I think you'll find that, as per last Olympic Games, their goal all of a sudden becomes their first ever gold medal, and their baseline now is to win a medal. And what we tend to forget here in Australia, the rest of the world's got the same idea that Canada's improving at the same rate, the South American countries are flying, and the USA is always going to be a powerhouse. So as much as we improve and as well as we're going, that's the thing with the global sport. Just the nature of it is you need to be great on that particular day. You need a little bit of luck go your way. And you've got to understand there's a lot of countries around the world who not only want what we want, but are capable of taking it as well. So it just adds to, we've just seen the Soccer World Cup. I mean, it's incredible to watch. For us, basketball is exactly the same thing. We see different styles of play. We see incredibly talented athletes, and I genuinely watch a game. I've got no idea how this is going to go, which is fun.
Chris, I got a question. Now, here's the thing, right? Now, a lot of young kids, they want to be an athlete in the sports, earn big money, the glamour, the media, celebrity status, and whatnot. I want you to take us to the feeling of becoming an NBA player, right? A lot of kids dream it. Millions and millions of kids dream it. Very few make it, right? How did it feel for you when you found out, damn, I'm going to be in the NBA, right? Did you get a private jet to fly you there?
No.
How was that? How was the treatment? Take us step by step on the raw feeling you had.
My first feeling was guilt, because I was sitting in a room of teammates when I got drafted. I thought Sam McKinnon was a better player than me. I thought I was probably the fourth best player on our team. Now, clearly they saw something potentially. And I look around the room and I've got some of my best friends, and I had this incredible life-changing opportunity that I know they would have killed for and didn't have. So my first feeling was guilt that it was me being afforded this opportunity. Then it became just this overwhelming sense of, wow, this is real. And I've got so far to go because I didn't grow up with the sport. I was about to walk into an environment where everyone I played against, or most people I played against, have been doing it since they're 4 years old. And for some, it was their way to get out of poverty or support their family, and they'd do anything. That wasn't me. I had a very normal upbringing. It was still a bit of a novelty. If I didn't play the game, I really didn't care. Which was also a positive because I couldn't leave it alone and it didn't consume me. But there was a little bit of time where, the first paycheck came in and I look at it and I think, well, that's more than I've ever made in my life, and that's what I make every 2 weeks now. And you spend a little bit, but I was probably of the same mindset that I wanted to send most of it home. Dad was an accountant. I probably went over the top a little bit, but I never went and bought the fancy cars. I bought investment properties here at home, and my overriding thing was if I'm only here for 3 years, I want to set my kids up, I want to set my family up, and that was my goal. I don't need much. I mean, I still go on holidays now and I camp. People look at me like I'm crazy, but my kids run around on bikes, they run around caravan parks, and their kids might be playing video games in hotel rooms. So I know which one I'd prefer, and I think I'm pretty fortunate I've always been like that. And don't get me wrong, we still enjoyed some nice meals. I think the best thing that I was able to do was, when you've got the ability to share your experiences with people close to you and take away the roadblock to them doing it. So I was able to fly people over to come and spend time. And it's always interesting. The ones who you really want to come are the ones that say, I don't want your money. I said, I don't want to give you my money, but I want to share this with you.
Yeah, 100%.
And so that was a really special thing, to be able to fly people around the world and spend time with them when I couldn't be at home. I think that was probably the best part about not having to, at some level, worry about spending a bit of money. You could do it and be okay.
Because you look at it now, like everyone, like, I want the thickest gold chain, I want like a Louis Vuitton suit or something, and there was a time where, I don't know if it's still happening now because I don't really follow the sport, but you'd see on social media when the players come to the game, they compare who has the best grip. Right? Yeah. So you were never into that. No. So what I see, you're extremely humble.
Some of them have individual stylists.
Yeah.
Every day they get completely kitted up.
Yeah, it is.
And they take photos on the way. If you saw me on the way, look what I'm wearing now. I mean, I didn't know this was on camera, but I'm wearing, if you're not watching, I'm wearing thongs, t-shirt and cargo shorts. But it's interesting. I've always thought one of the best qualities in somebody who never needs to earn another dollar again is that if I walked in and sat around the table and was talking, that I'd never know. Mm-hmm. And I've got a number of close friends that if they sat around this table now, you wouldn't know they're worth tens or hundreds of millions of dollars because they don't flaunt it. The people who know and they're comfortable having it, but they don't need to tell people. The people close to them know, and that's all that matters. And I think that at some level, that was where I wanted to be, that if you didn't know I played basketball outside of being 7 foot tall, you wouldn't know.
This is from your upbringing though, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I've got enough mates who'd punch me in the face if I ever became that arrogant. And I probably trended there a little bit, but came back really, really quickly. But I mean, it's not real. I've seen enough people lose all of their money in the NBA. They've made tens of millions and lost tens of millions. It's not real. It's who you share it with. It's, like I said, I sat in a room one time and, friends of mine didn't know who my mate was, and I told them afterwards and their jaws hit the floor. They were, what? So would never have picked it. Look at someone like Mark Cuban, who owns the Dallas Mavericks. He'll be sitting on the sidelines wearing running shoes, a pair of jeans and a Dallas Mavericks T-shirt. If you didn't know, you wouldn't know. And I don't know. I just think that's a really good quality. It's probably one that I've always tried to hold on to, and it's interesting. I've had a lot of money. I've been separated. My marriage didn't work, so I don't have as much money as I used to. And I found the happiest I've been is when I didn't have money, because I didn't have to worry about it.
Interesting. You mentioned Mark Cuban. It's a great segue to what I actually wanted to ask you about. I'm a big fan of his through Shark Tank and everything else that he's got going on. NBA teams are privately owned, so it's a very unique dynamic there. You compare that to, for example, the AFL, which is not privately owned, and you have a layer of like owners, managers, and then players. How is it the chemistry there? How does that really work? So as a player, how much do you feel that there's heat from the owners or from the managers, or who actually calls the shots? Who decides what happens?
The owner always gets to sign off. And my experience is more in the NBL, which was the same. And I didn't have Mark Cuban. I had Ross Perot Jr. as an owner. We didn't see him. But in my experiences, the owner gets to sign off at the end, but you employ the CEOs, the scouts to draft people to make the choices, present, and it's not to a board, it's to the owner who'll sign off on the choices. But the right owners will understand, of course, that they've employed you to do a job. They're not going to tell you how to do it. They're going to employ you because you are the most competent person to do it. So that tends to hold true. But even in speaking to some of the former teammates who've played under Mark Cuban, that's what he is. He's just brought Nico in from Nike to run the club, and he's stepped back even further to allow Nico to run the club, and knows that he'll do a good job and wants to be across it because he invests a lot of money in it, and you want to understand what's happening, and just to make sure there's no massive red flag that's gone unseen. But no, look, you never really felt a pressure, and as players you tend to be naive and you stay within the locker room and you understand decisions are being made, and you stay in your lane. You do as you're told, you do your job, you do it to the best of your ability, and always found it tends to work out if you work hard. I mean, it's not that complex. And you mentioned Cuban, but what you'll find that the clubs that tend to succeed are the ones where the top level of management are approachable. They're relationship based. Clearly, they've got a lot of money. Clearly, they've got a lot of IP and knowledge into what they do, but they don't need to demonstrate that every day. They're comfortable that other people can make choices and they can be there and have relationship with the players, relationships with the staff, and as much as they can in that type of environment, have them feel like it's a family and have them feel valued, knowing, of course, that you might be trading them tomorrow.
Yeah.
But even when it comes to that, I think the right clubs exit players the right way and make sure that even if they trade them or cut them, they're always still welcome back. And, that's me with the Mavericks. I was there 2 years and I've just spent 2 weeks with them and they've treated me incredible and they have no need to. I mean, I was 1,000th player down their line, but they still do a great job with their alumni.
The thing with privately owned sports clubs, you see it all around the world, especially in the English Premier League in football, like Manchester United, Arsenal. You have the fans wanting them gone because they treat the club as a business rather than like a passion, right? The fans always have the passion, and the club that's privately owned they see it as a business, right? Have you experienced that? Like the owners when you were playing, were they more business minded, or more than like let's win this, we're gonna pump the money, and we want to win some trophies.
One thing I'll say is the fans have got no idea. Right. I mean, with what you do imagine if you gave one of your investors who invests $100 a year with you and said, "Okay, tell us what we should do." Yeah. You'd shake your head and go, "You've got no idea." Yeah. So you've got to, of course, listen, but fans need to understand that they're making decisions for the betterment of the club, for the success of the club. The worst business decisions you can make are emotional ones, and fans, like you say, are emotional. I always feel like fans need to do a better job of understanding the reason behind some of the decisions, but at the same time, the club can share them at some stage. I suppose there are so many things that if fans knew happened within a club, they probably wouldn't be fans. So you've got to protect fans from the actual mechanics of what goes on, and you present something to them for 2 hours a week or 2 hours 3 times a week or whatever it is. But no, look, I think the thing is when you're a fan, you pay your few $100s a year and you're a member, just enjoy it. Turn up, enjoy it. What I found as a player is that the losses meant more to the fans than they did for me. I'd go and I'd sleep fine. Okay, we lost the game, we'll go again. The fan will dwell on it all week and they'll have a terrible week at work because their team lost. Yeah. You see it in the AFL. And I'm a Western Bulldogs fan. I'm a little bit the same. I'm upset. I don't want to listen to sports radio for 2 days if the Bulldogs lost. Yeah. If I was playing, I wouldn't care. I'm back at training tomorrow. We'll fix it. We'll get better and we'll go again. But no, look, the one thing I'll say about private ownership, the owners didn't make all of their money being naive or making bad business choices. And they're not in it to just hand their money back. They want it to be sustainable. They want it to be successful. There's always a reason for the choices that some of the fans won't understand. But one of the greatest lessons I've learned in life is to never make emotional decisions. They don't tend to be good ones. And I reckon fans would seek to make a lot of emotional decisions given the chance, and I don't think they'd do the right thing by the club. Because
fans always like, if someone's playing terrible, sack him, get rid of them, terminate the contract, get rid of the coach.
And you know what, I've had someone like that, and their partner passed away 2 days ago, and they had a crap game, sack him. You're like, they just lost their girlfriend, and you've got no idea what happened. So we evaluate these professional athletes on a 2-hour window every week when there's 99% of their lives we don't understand, yet we evaluate them on what we see in that small moment without context. So I'm probably fortunate. I've been on both sides, and it's funny. Sometimes even with the players I see, I'll watch a game, and I watched a game last night, and there's a player that I've worked with, and in my mind I just knew something was going on away from basketball. I don't know if I'm right or not, but I think I am. And that's where my mind goes straight to. If they're not performing, I wonder if they're okay off the pitch or off the court, as opposed to cut them and get someone else in. It's just it's a knee-jerk reaction, and I think maybe it's that upbringing again, but I always want to just make sure they're okay, and if they need help, make sure you're there to provide help. And that's one thing clubs do a better job of that I think a lot of fans wouldn't understand. The players go through so much just to get onto the field or get onto the court. They don't always get it right, but they're trying.
How did you cope with criticism from fans, media?
Didn't listen. Couldn't care less. Could not care less. Unless I'd take advice from you, I'm not going to take criticism. Simple as that. I had about 5 people I listened to. If you weren't one of them, I didn't care what you said.
So who would you listen to?
Like I said, the people close, my agent, my coaches, my teammates, some of the support staff. But, even parents to a certain extent. Dad was always one to give advice. Like, as much as I love him, he's got no idea what's going on a basketball court. So you let it go in one ear, out the other, you're not ahead, you're not along, and you're okay, see ya.
And it wouldn't affect you at all?
No.
You sleep comfortable.
It'd be like if you're investing if you're investing someone's money and you lose a little bit, and they come in and tell you how to do your job tomorrow. You'll sit there and you'll nod, and then you go back and do your job the best way you know.
Happens a lot.
Yeah, right.
Happens a lot.
Exactly. So you listen, you let them have their say, and then you go back and you do what you've been educated to do.
Yeah.
It's the minute you start listening to criticism. I never used to read papers. I never read message boards. I very rarely read social media about me. I read about other things to catch up. But I like my sayings. One of my favourites is, like I said, if you wouldn't accept criticism, if you wouldn't accept advice from someone, don't accept criticism. Young players make them that mistake a lot.
Yeah. In this day and age, everything affects everyone now. Everyone's very mentally weak
because they
now.
choose to let it.
Yeah,
it's a choice. So you can you choose to get on Twitter. You choose to read it. You don't have to. You make a choice to do that.
And then they take time off saying, I'm mentally distressed. I can't from all the abuse. I'm taking leave.
So, it's only there if you know it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not many people will come up to your face and give you criticism. It's all done behind a computer
Keyboard
screen.
warriors.
Yeah. So there are a lot of choices we make that we don't know we're making.
Yeah.
And probably the most valuable ones are the hardest because all of the players want to read the good stuff, but even that's fraught with danger. Again, don't take that whole complimentary. Don't let your fans tell you how great you're going. Let your teammates tell you. Let your coaches tell you because they'll be honest with you. Some of my best friends are the ones who I'd have a go, what's wrong with you? I'm like, thank you, because everyone's patting you on the back on the way out saying how great you were. I'm like, it was terrible. So no, it's just... There are so many voices out there. One of the greatest challenges I think young athletes have and young people have is choosing whose voices they listen to or whose words they read because they're all presented as fact. They're so far from it.
So you're a very humble person, Chris. In 2005, 2006, you won the MVP award in the NBL.
Yeah.
And they gave you a Hummer.
Yeah.
What colour was it?
It was black. That was the first year I came back from Russia, and it's funny. I did win the MVP, but we won the championship, which was bigger, and the grand final MVP was bigger because that essentially meant I performed when it really mattered. The MVP of the league, I suppose, was a reflection of consistency. The grand final one meant that when it really, really mattered, I played well. But it's interesting. I gave the car back after 12 months and I had to pay fringe benefits tax on it. And, it was annoying almost. I didn't have enough leg room in it. Yeah, can't park it anywhere. It was a nice little prize and we had a little bit of fun with it. But you can only drive one car at a time. And, it was a good prize. But no, look, it's interesting. Again, it feels like such a selfish award because I got handed the responsibility of the role where the ball was in my hands a lot. And some of my Stephen Hoare, Daryl Coletto, Dave Thomas, Darryl McDonald, David Stiff, all of these guys, they were just so willingly accepted the roles they had. And we were always encouraging to be more and to be better. And they hadn't been that with Gaze, Copeland, Bradkey. That had smaller roles. And so the joy of that year was watching all of those guys grow their roles from what they had been the previous years and all have their moments in massive games. And, winning that championship, we were meant to be rebuilding and no one thought we were a contender. So to do that was really, really special. And to do it, when 4 of the biggest names in Australian basketball walked away from the club without having won one for a number of years, to win it the year after was really, really special.
Interesting. Could you take us through a bit about your time in Russia, right? That's quite unique. It's quite intriguing. Russia seems to be this sort of, it's closed off a little bit from the rest of the world. They do whatever happens in Russia, almost stays in Russia. How was it like being an Australian player playing in the NBA, and then you go to Russia? How's the game, and how's the I guess, the environment there for a basketball player?
Hard, tough. It was freezing cold. It was dark most of the day. No one spoke English. I reckon 3 months in, I made the biggest mistake of my life.
Sounds like Rocky IV.
Yeah, and what? But at the same time, I got through that moment where I didn't want to be there, and sort of gave myself my theoretical punch in the face. And but the great thing about going into an environment like that was I could be anyone I wanted. I shot the ball better. I was a lot more aggressive. I didn't care what they thought. And I had this blank slate that I could start with. And that level of aggressiveness paid off early and continued to pay off. And, not many people at home saw those years, but I played better in Russia than I did in Australia. They were probably my 3 best years on the basketball court. But maybe it was because genuinely I didn't care. And I say that in a positive way. It wasn't that I didn't care about basketball. It was I didn't care what anyone thought outside of because I didn't know anyone. I didn't care what the fans thought. I didn't know, because you can't take criticism when they're speaking in Russian. I couldn't understand it anyway. So I didn't understand what was being said about me. And I just went and I played. And, we made the Russian championship the first year. We did great in the European Cup. We won a championship the next year, which was Russia's first ever European championship since they got admitted into the European Union in any sport, which was massive. Yeah. So, what I learnt a lot about myself. That was the toughest living and basketball environment I'd ever been in, and I wanted to quit 3 months in. I'm glad I didn't. And it probably took a teammate who spoke Russian and English who joined the team that sort of bridged that gap and allowed me to be a little bit more social and understand a little bit more of what was going on around me. But no, it was hard. It was long. It was hard. But to fast forward 18 years when COVID hit. I'd seen it. I'd been that was Russia. You'd go and sit in your apartment. It was freezing cold. It was snowing. It was minus 40, and you'd just go from apartment to stadium to apartment to stadium, and that was it. So COVID, and I don't mean to say it in a blasé way, but it was easy for me because I understood that people's normal changes, and it's amazing what you can get accustomed to. And I got accustomed to Russia. That became my normal, and so COVID for me became my normal. And when it hit, and when the long one hit, there was so much negativity around it. I mean, I wrote a book, I'd changed careers, I had a few other business ideas that I just started putting the wheels in motion when everything shut down. So that when I came out with it, I was ready. When I came out of it, I was ready to roll, and that was the most reward. It was such a rewarding 12 months of being locked down for most of it that. A lot of that came from my experience in Russia, which I remain grateful for.
What are the positives from Russia?
Exactly that I became grateful for things that I wasn't grateful for, whether it be a comfortable bed, whether it be a summer's day in Melbourne, whether it be spending time with my family. The little things that we take for granted, I just became so much more appreciative of. The fact that we've got a good health system, a good education system, the fact we all speak English, the fact that we can walk down the street safely, little things like that we just, honestly, we take for granted. And until we know that there are places in the world where that doesn't exist, I think it's just, we tend to seek out the bad and complain about the tough stuff where, that's easy to do. In Russia it was the same. For the first 3 months, I was poor me and I felt sorry for myself. It took, like I said, probably that moment where I thought, hang on, there's probably positives here. Let's go looking. And then, so by the time I found the positives in Russia and in my teammates and in the situation and the humour in what I was doing, and then the love of coming back home for those 3 months in the middle, I appreciated being home, and I appreciated the time I had with people. So there was sometimes the positives in a negative situation aren't there to be taken when you're going through it, but they're there to reflect back on when things get a little bit better, and I just reckon your good moments are always a little bit better once you've been through the tough stuff, because you genuinely appreciate. I mean, even playing for the Melbourne Tigers, I'd been doing this thing that I was good at in playing basketball for so many years, but I hadn't been doing it in front of family and friends. That was the reason I came home. I wanted my daughter to go to school here, and before I retired, I wanted to play in front of family and friends, and just running up and down the court and glimpsing across and seeing my brother or my family or some good mates, and knowing I was going out for a beer or for a meal afterwards just to have a good night. That was unheard of for the last 3 years. So it doesn't take much to be grateful for things, and that, if I was to, in one term, it'd be that. My level of gratitude from the minute I left Russia has just been off the charts.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I want to tap into a bit of the leadership side of things. Obviously, being in the NBA, when we come back to the NBA, there's a lot of people, famous people there, a lot of celebrities, there's a lot of money involved, there's a lot of egos involved. How did you go about managing all the ego in the locker room and teammates, the coaches, all the relationships?
Yeah.
I'm assuming everyone was like, I'm the best, I'm the greatest, everyone's famous, everyone's signing autographs. There was a sense of ego, I'm assuming, right?
Sure.
How did you manage all that?
I sort of found a way to blend into the background. Keep in mind, I was 22 years old, and it's interesting. As my career evolved, and I'd been through the NBA and I'd seen what it looked like, and on a lot of levels, the NBA is what good leadership doesn't look like, for the exact reasons you mentioned. You get the good teams, and as they become successful, people tend to put their egos aside a bit to work towards a common goal. But the interesting thing when you talk about leadership, and I always get asked when I speak corporately, what sort of leader should I be? What type of leaders? I mean, the part that I think people always tend to overlook or forget to mention is, before you're even worried about becoming a leader, it's, first of all, you got to choose who you follow, because you need to aspire, understand what probably connected you with the best leaders you've had. And you know what, I've asked thousands of people, and if you were to think of your best leader you've ever had, mentor, coach, teacher, whatever it might be, and if you were to describe him in one word, I can guarantee you that word's got nothing to do with skill. It's got to do with how they make you feel, or how you are in a room with them. They make the room a better place to be in. And so before you even worry about leadership, what type of person do you choose to follow? Who do you want to be like? And then, are you leading yourself? Because until you get those two things right, I don't think you can even begin to lead other people. And, when you do get to leadership, for me, leadership's a series of ideas. There's no right way to do things most times. Sometimes, of course, there is, but it's presenting a series of ideas to allow the people that are following to determine what's best for them, and then providing them a platform of support and encouragement to take risks without fear of failure. And I mean, I know that all sounds really cliche and generic, but I never wanted to be a leader. I had no intention. But I realised I'd been around some incredible people. I'd realised I'd been in some unique circumstances, and it was funny. I was sitting around a team dinner with the Melbourne Tigers. I was telling some stories, and people seemed to be interested. And the minute I became better at storytelling and probably leading was the minute I stopped talking about myself and talking about others, and sharing what I'd learnt from people in the NBA or people in Russia, and instead of talking about me, spoke about them and how they affected me. And that, for me, was, again, a series of ideas taught through storytelling, and something I've always held on to. And if I ever find myself in a situation where I might be considered a leader, that's who I am. I hope I'm authentic. I hope I support people to go and make the most glorious mistakes with the right intent, because, I mean, I think that's the thing. If you work hard and you've got the right intent, I'll support you like crazy, whether it's on a basketball court or in an office. But if you're lazy or you're selfish, and then I'm not really that interested in working with you. But you figure that out pretty quickly. And even with what I'm doing now, people would always ask, "What are you going to do next?" And I always tell them they're asking the wrong question. And they said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You should be asking me who I'm going to do it with." Because I can do anything with the right people and do it successfully, but I can't do anything successfully with the wrong people. So I think that's a really roundabout way to answer your question about leadership, I think. But it comes down to people, it comes down to support, it comes down to working. And it comes down to, I hope, a sense of humility where the best leaders aren't the one who need to be out in front. They're the ones who should be at the back, making sure everyone's heading in the right direction and making sure they're okay.
That's
really strong
so
message.
much wisdom, Chris.
Yeah.
It's crazy. You learned a lot from Russia.
Very profound. So on the topic of leadership, in terms of coaching and whatnot, that's also an area that you've progressed quite heavily into. When you're grooming young professional basketball players and whatnot to become the best version of themselves, how do you go about identifying who has the right ingredients? Do you have anything that says, like, this person, given the right support, given the right system around them, will be fine? And is there anything that sort of you red flag at the start and say, look, maybe this isn't right for them?
There are a lot of red flags, of course, and without going too far, behavioural things, body type. And when I say body type, you can tell a lot about a person's lifestyle just by looking at them. And that sounds really unfair, but it's fact. And if the thing is, oftentimes when I'm recruiting or, I might get 30 seconds to evaluate you, so it's not fair. But the habit and opportunity thing, how are you? I tell a story all the time, or ask young athletes, I say, look, if you're in a tryout, there's 40 kids and you've got an hour, how long am I watching you for? It's a minute and a half.
Yeah.
So which minute and a half am I watching? And they say, I don't know. I said, exactly. So you better make sure that every single second you're on the floor, you're presenting yourself in a manner that if I was evaluating you, you'd be happy with that, because I can't tell you what 90 seconds I'll be watching. But that extends out to when you're leaving the gym, when you're arriving at the gym, if I'm in the room and you don't know I'm in the room. There's physical attributes. It's interesting. Chris Golding just played his 400th game for Melbourne United. I went to the game yesterday. He was someone I went and trained. The year after I retired, I went and trained with the Gold Coast for 2 days. I was up there on holidays. They invited me down, and we were both on the third team. He was a development player, and I was retired, and I just took a team and shared a little bit of advice. And I'd always remembered him. He had a long hair. He had like a shoestring around his head, like a little headband, and his level of aggressiveness, and he was fearless, and you could just tell there was something about him. He was special. And I became a head coach 2 years later, and the Gold Coast had folded. Their 4 best players had gotten contracts, and I called up after Chris Golding, and he was out of a job, and I literally offered him a job based on those 2 days. I said, mate, I remember you. Do you want to come? He literally said yes on the phone. He didn't have a job. He came down, and there was, you talk about advice. That's where the owners, you better make sure you're recruiting the right people, because I'm trying to sell them, recruiting this kid. We're firing an import. So I went down and watched my daughter play a Friday night game, and if you know Melbourne basketball, she was playing a 9:40 game. So we're talking 10:30 at night. There was only the one court with a game on it, and I was watching all the way down the back. I just saw someone shooting without lights, and I kind of wandered down because it looked like he could play, and it was Chris. And so I didn't let him know I saw him, and I went back to the lady who was in the ticket office and said, when did Chris turn up? He said, he turns up every Friday and most other weeknights when everyone's finished, he just comes and shoots. And that's when I knew I had the right player. Because I knew he'd put it, like, to go back to before, he was investing in himself in his own time. Without even telling, I wouldn't have known if I didn't see, but what I did see was the improvement that he continued to make. And so I think at the time he'd played maybe 20 NBL games, and he just played his 400th. He's won an NBL championship. He's a member of the Tokyo bronze medal Olympic team. He didn't have a job, and he was, I think he's sort of living proof, and he sort of solidifies my belief that I saw him for a couple of hours 2 times, and he stood out enough to me that when I had the opportunity to look for someone, I called him. And then whatever I saw in him turned out to be right, because the work that he did when I didn't know he was doing. So you look for the work rate, you look for that level of aggressiveness, you look for body type. But it's sometimes hard. It's gut feel. I love evaluating people when they don't know they're being evaluated. And there's a very famous coach in American college basketball who recently passed away named Lute Olson, and he's got what's called the janitor test, where when he recruits from high schools, he knows that their head coach will say good things about the talented player because the high school, there's a vested interest for the high school, the coach, the principal to get a player to University of Arizona because it looks good for the high school for them to then go and recruit the next kid. So he knows he'll get all the good stuff. So he sends people in to meet with the janitor to say, do you know who that tall athletic kid is? And of course, how is he when he walks the corridors? Because the janitor's got no vested interest. Yeah. He'll tell you what the kid's like. He'll see the kid when the coach is not around. So his very first test before he'd even interview these kids was to interview the janitor. And if the janitor said he was a bully or if he said he treated the janitor like a second-class citizen, they wouldn't even recruit him. They'd just it was more than a red flag. You cross his name off. Wow. So they wanted upstanding citizens who were respectful, who treated people well. And again, when they didn't know they were being evaluated, behaved in a manner that would probably present the best opportunity for them to be successful. So, again, a very long-winded answer to your question, but I don't think there's any one thing. I think there's a series of things and philosophies you develop over the years, and I'll probably give you a different answer in 3 or 4 years, or I'll have something else to add.
Yeah. I think if you do that janitor test in the NBA right now, a lot of people
fail.
Well, a lot of people get infatuated by talent, and they're oftentimes they're coach killers. Kyrie Irving will never win a thing. He'll sell some jerseys. He'll never win a thing. And, it's just a really easy example because he's all about him. He's one of the most talented basketball players in the world. He won a championship with LeBron, but that was LeBron. Yeah. The minute he left, he ran the Celtics into the ground. He's run the Nets into the ground. He'll run the next team into the ground. He'll sell some jerseys, but it's not a risk I'd be willing to take, and he's not a teammate I'd like to surround other young athletes with for their development. I'd want to make sure that the people in charge of my program or the key players are someone that the others aspire to be around, want to be around, and want to turn up and spend time with. I don't think he's 100%.
that. Toxic people usually, there's toxic spreads.
That's
100%.
It.
Before we start wrapping things up, any last questions about you gentlemen?
Quick one. I needed to get this in here.
Yep.
You were a teammate.
I love when a question starts with a laugh. It's fantastic.
You were a teammate of Ron Artest.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Famous for the Malice in the Palace, where he got suspended for an entire season, the longest suspension ever. Have you got a story about Ron?
Look, Ron, it's interesting now because I was like 24 or something when I played with Ron, and he was a rookie. And again, I've always said I've been naive, and one of the things I don't think anyone understood back then is mental health. So you look back now, and if you gave your time over again, I think everyone would have approached a young player like that differently and probably offered different types of support, knowing what we know now. But I mean, Ron was always out of control. There'd be fights at training, and you know what? He came from a low socioeconomic background, and it was his way to escape. And in his mind, no one was going to change who I am. And he got his license, and he wasn't the smartest kid either, but he kept talking about the car he was going to buy the day he got his license, and we had this gated community where the training venue was. And the day we all knew, because they'd been talking about getting his car, he's walking through the precinct. I'm like, what's he must have failed. And so they go, no, it wasn't me, but the teammates were like, look, thought you were getting your car. And I said, yeah, I got it. It didn't fit in the gate. He went and got a monster truck. like an actual
with
monster
big
truck.
Wheels.
Yeah. But then, of course, the game the next day, that he got this massive fine because the monster truck also needed 2 lanes on a freeway. So he was an hour late to the game, so he was essentially fined for missing a game, being late to a game, suspended again, and I don't think he kept the truck very long, but the same sort of thing. He didn't make great choices back then, and having said that, there probably weren't the right mechanisms in back then to support him, and it sounds to me like he's doing a lot better. I don't know him. I didn't keep in touch with him, but it sounds like he's figured a few things out, and it would have been. You look back with things like that all the time with what we know in all kinds of areas, and you kind of wish they'd have been a little bit more educated at times. I think people like Ron are probably case in point that we all could have probably handled it better had we been better educated.
That's solid. Any last questions, guys? All right, before we wrap things up, Chris, I have a little segment where I ask 10 out of interest questions, which is 10 rapid fire questions, and you can answer it as fast or slow as you can.
Knowing me, it'll be slow. Yep.
It's totally up to you. So we'll start off if you're ready. Ready?
Yep.
All right, the first question. Favorite teammate to play with in the NBA?
Steve Nash, he just made everyone better and was someone who was almost out of the NBA, was struggling so much and became a 2-time MVP. He was just incredible.
Perfect. Toughest team you played against in the NBA?
Oh, everyone. I would say the Chicago Bulls, but I never lost to them. We were 1-0, so that was fantastic. But yeah, probably the Shaq Kobe Lakers were probably really tough.
Okay. Favorite arena to play in?
You know what? It was interesting. I only remember when Dirk Nowitzki said it the other day, but the old Sacramento Stadium was insane, and I'd forgotten about it. But that for the atmosphere, but I think just walking to Madison Square Garden and playing there was pretty special.
Yeah. Best current day NBA player?
Current day NBA player, you'd probably have to say Giannis, followed by Steph Curry.
All right. And the best NBA player of all time?
You know what? My answer to that is always, I never feel a need to list them or number them because I'm very happy to appreciate the greatest while I'm watching them and not feel a need to put them below or above someone else. But no, look, I love watching Steph Curry. He's changed the game. Giannis has changed the game. Michael Jordan's the greatest of all time, easily.
The GOAT. Team you hated the most when you were a player?
Interestingly enough, I probably hated the Melbourne Tigers when I was with the Southeast Melbourne Magic. That was a proper rivalry. It wasn't a fabricated one. We didn't have that in the NBA. I didn't have that in Russia because it didn't mean enough. But the interesting part was I started and finished my career with the Melbourne Tigers, but right in the middle, I probably hated the Melbourne Tigers more than any other team.
And I think I actually hated you, actually. You go with the Melbourne Tigers then.
Right.
This is an interesting one. Most famous person you've met, because I'm sure you didn't meet a few big names.
It's interesting because this is a whole other thing that I love chatting about because we come across them all the time and people become infatuated with famous people and want a photo, want a selfie. I was always more interested in having a conversation with them and understanding them better, and it served me well. So I did meet a lot and I was fortunate to be able to spend time with a lot because I never saw them as a celebrity or never saw them as someone famous. I always saw them as another human being with a fascinating story that really interested me. And I think my level of interest in some level interested them because they're like, hang on, I'm not used to this. This is different. So, how do you go past someone like Michael Jordan or how do you go past someone, I won't go through all the names because there's a few private conversations I've had, but I've been really, really fortunate over the years. But if you're looking just from a sporting perspective, I don't think you find anyone more famous than Michael Jordan. So that's a nice, easy answer. But no, there've been some really fascinating conversations over the years. Yeah.
Now, out of the NBA questions, done with that. Favorite superhero?
Favorite superhero? That's a good one. My son would hate me. He's the biggest Marvel fan. He could tell you. You know what? Am I allowed to say Deadpool? I reckon he's hilarious.
Absolutely.
I think he's hilarious. Only the last few years, but I think that's just genius.
The first person to say Deadpool on that podcast.
There you go.
I've never got Deadpool. What is your deepest fear?
My deepest fear? Let's not get too far, but it always surrounds bad things happening to my kids. Yeah. Like you always want to make sure you're there to protect them without having them avoid tough times, but making sure you're there for them, and you always hope that the really bad stuff doesn't happen to the kids.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think any parent would agree with that. Last question. What advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Probably covered it, but, I'd probably always say that, if there was someone in my life or with a goal I wanted to achieve that could give me that goal, if I could imagine how I'd behave if they were standing right next to me, to behave like that all the time, and to be that person all the time, because one day they might be. But I think, to tie it up, I'm really proud of. Like, if I go over my basketball career, I think the thing I'm proudest of, I think I figured out how good I could become, which was all I ever wanted to do, was to figure out what I was capable of. And I think a lot of people go through their careers not understanding what they're capable of doing because they're not prepared to invest enough into it. So I think it would be reiterating that to make sure I do everything I can to make sure that I reach my potential, to make sure that I always chase doing things that I love doing, not feel like I need to do. And to make, probably the biggest one now that I've talked my way through it, is to stop probably trying to please other people and to be someone that I'm not when I'm young. I think when we're young, we try to want to be people to help us fit in.
Yeah.
And especially when you're 7 foot tall or look different or sound different or whatever, all you want to do is fit in, where I'd probably tell myself, just go and stand out. Like, just go and stand out for all the right reasons and own it. And, you know, don't waste too much time trying to have people who don't like you anyway like you. Just find the people who like you for you and spend your time with them. Go and be successful at whatever it is you love, and take those people close to you along for the ride.
Great advice. Before we wrap up, you guys got any last words? Not questions, but words. You don't want to thank him? Come on, thank the guy for joining us.
It's been awesome, because like as a kid growing up in the 90s, 80s, 90s, the Melbourne Tigers, the Southeast Melbourne Magic rivalry, as I said before, hating you that you were, you know, in the way of them winning some of those titles, but also knowing you're a Bulldogs supporter means a lot, mate, because
You're a Bulldogs supporter?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you know what it's like. We still live off 2016.
Absolutely.
It was an incredible year.
But on that note, Chris, thank you so much for coming.
You're more
Honestly, I feel like I've learnt more because I'm a newbie in basketball.
Right.
You throwing names left and right. I'm like, who are these people? Right. But yeah, it's.
We'll have to get you along to a game. You can see some of the
names for
yourself.
I do want to look into it a bit more now.
Awesome.
I have no choice now.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Appreciate it.
Chris.
Thanks, guys.